What if I told you there's a bird so colorful that it almost looks like someone painted it by hand? Today, we're bringing one of the rainforest's greatest masterpieces to life, the spectacular Scarlet Macaw. Grab your paints and let's continue traveling the world one watercolor painting at a time. Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you're here as we continue our watercolor journey across the incredible wildlife of Latin America. Today's subject is one of the most recognizable birds on Earth. Brilliant reds, vibrant yellows, rich blues, and turquoise feathers all come together to create a bird that almost seems too colorful to be real. The scarlet macaw has inspired artists for centuries, and today it will inspire our next watercolor painting. Let's begin with a rough sketch. I'm using watercolor pencils in red, yellow, turquoise, and blue to loosely map out where each group of feathers will go. Using color pencils instead of graphite makes it much easier to blend the sketch into the painting later, and it also reminds us where each beautiful color belongs. Don't worry about the tiny details just yet. Focus on the overall shape of the bird, the graceful curve of the beak, the position of the wings, and the sturdy branch supporting our colorful friend. Now let's switch to watercolor. Using a large brush and a very diluted blue mixture, begin painting the background. This soft wash immediately defines the silhouette of the macaw while suggesting a bright tropical sky. Keep the painting nice and watery, allowing it to spread naturally across the paper. Once this layer is complete, let it dry completely. Patience is one of watercolor's greatest teachers. If we begin painting the feathers too soon, the vibrant reds and yellows may bleed into the background. While we wait, here's a fun fact. Scarlet macaws live throughout the tropical forest of Central and South America, including Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Brazil. These intelligent parrots can live for over 50 years in the wild and even longer under human care. Some have learned to mimic words and solve surprisingly complex problems. Now our background is dry and it's time for the fun part. Let's start adding color. Using a smaller brush for more control, begin with the brilliant red feathers. Notice that my brush strokes follow the directions of the feathers. Short, upward strokes help create the illusion of overlapping plumage. Next comes the rich yellow, followed by turquoise and deep blue. One of the wonderful things about watercolor is matching these colors glow as the transparent layers build on one another. Little by little, the bird begins to emerge. Continue working slowly. There's no prize for finishing first. The beauty comes from enjoying the process. As the colorful feathers begin to dry, let's move to the face. Using a fine brush, begin defining the eye and the beak. If needed, switch to a watercolor pencil for even greater precision around the eye and facial markings. Small details like this often become the focal point of the painting. Next, we'll continue refining the feathers. Using slightly more saturated versions of each color, add texture by following the natural directions of the plumage. A few darker reds, a touch more blue beneath the wing, hints of turquoise catching the light. Notice how the bird slowly becomes more three-dimensional. It's amazing how just a few carefully placed strokes can create the illusion of hundreds of feathers. Now we'll move down to the branch. Using light browns, warm oranges, and hints of green, establish the base layer. Be careful to leave small, unpainted spaces where the clouds will wrap around the branch. This simple planning step makes painting the feet much easier later. As the branch base layer dries, let's add more texture throughout the macaw while we learn another fascinating fact. Scarlet macaws form incredibly strong, lifelong pair bonds. You'll often see two macaws flying together, feeding together, and even grooming one another. Their loud calls help them stay connected as they travel through dense rainforest canopy. Now, it's time to return to the darker details. Using a rich black mixture, carefully paint the claws and deepen the shadows around the beak and eye. Because watercolor is transparent, the darker areas usually require several thin layers instead of one heavy application. Allow each layer to dry before adding the next. This gradual approach creates beautiful depth without losing the transparency that makes watercolor so unique. The branch also deserves a little extra attention. Using horizontal strokes of different lengths and thicknesses, begin creating the texture of the bark. It's fascinating when you stop and think about it. Painting is really just carefully placed blobs of color next to one another. Some are lighter, some are darker, some are sharper, and some are softer. Yet together, they trick our brains to seeing feathers, branches, sunlight, and life. That's part of the magic of watercolor. Now, let me show you something every watercolor artist experiences. Sometimes the paint has other plans. Colors bleed, edges soften unexpectedly, water flows where you didn't intend, and that's perfectly okay. Most mistakes aren't permanent. A clean-up damp brush can often lift excess pigment. A paper towel can also absorb unwanted puddles. Sometimes, bleeding the color into a neighborhood area creates an effect that looks even more natural than what you originally planned. Speaking of mistakes, here's one from today's painting. I became a little too excited to finish and decided to speed things up with a hairdryer. Unfortunately, the airflow was a little bit too strong and pulled some of the red paint from the macaw's head into the blue sky. Oops! It wasn't what I intended, but watercolor has a wonderful way of teaching patience. Sometimes the painting reminds us to slow down. Sometimes it gives us an unexpected lesson, and sometimes those little imperfections become part of the story behind the artwork. Now, let's revisit our background. Adding a few slightly darker values to the different areas creates variation and helps the macaw stand out even more. The goal isn't a perfect flat background. Small changes in value make the painting feel much more alive. As we finish this piece, continue moving back and forth between the feathers, the branch, and the background. Use watercolor pencils to strengthen tiny details, sharpen feather edges, and add subtle textures wherever needed. Take a step back every so often. Your painting will tell you when it feels balanced. When the colors sing together, when the contrast feels right, when your Scarlet Macaw seems ready to fly off the page. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed not only learning a few watercolor techniques, but also discovering another incredible animal and the beautiful habitat it calls home. If you've been enjoying this series, I invite you to explore the entire Latin American wildlife collection right here on the channel. I've already painted adorable capybaras, sleepy sloths, colorful toucans, and there are many more amazing animals still to come. Every painting is another stop on our creative adventure around the world, and I'd love for you to join me for each one. Until next time, remember to find joy in the small blessings all around you. Keep exploring, keep creating, and as always, happy painting.